welcome all of you on behalf of the Law Society School of Law, University of Kashmir, to the final round of this debate competition that's being organized by Law Society School of Law, University of Kashmir. We are immensely thankful to Professor Farooq Ahmed Mir for taking time out of his busy schedule and consenting to judge this final round. 8 participants have been selected on the basis of their performance in the preliminary round, where they got an opportunity to debate on the question of feasibility of mandating the use of Kashmiri language in schools in Kashmir. These 8 participants will now debate on the issue as to whether India should ratify the United Nations Refugee Convention. The refugee crisis, all the countries around the world are facing refugee crisis and immigrant crisis. And India is also, in that sense, facing that particular crisis. These participants are going to debate on the question as to whether the rights and duties imposed on the states under the United Nations Refugee Convention, whether India should ratify the convention and fulfill the obligations under the same. Keeping that in mind, I hope that we have a healthy debate, and I wish all the participants the best of luck.
So today, I will be speaking for the motion, and I'm not saying this for the sake of a debate. I truly believe that Kashmiri language should be made mandatory in schools in Kashmir. But first of all, I would like to know something from you all. So how many of you all believe that Kashmiri language must be made compulsory in schools in Kashmir? You can raise your hands. Oh, great. Thank you. So Kashmiri, talking about Kashmiri, it is one of the oldest and the richest languages of the world. Historians agree that this language is about 2000 years old and its script is 900 years old, thus making it older than many popular languages in South Asia like Hindi and English. Kashmiri is a major language spoken in Jammu and Kashmir and is the mother tongue of the majority of the population. It is spoken in 18 out of 22 districts in Jammu and Kashmir. Now this data, it looks all good, all positive, right? 18, majority, mother tongue. But is it positive? Now what actually happens in schools? The teachers give more thrust on English, they give more thrust on Urdu, and I have heard some schools impose fines on students who speak Kashmiri, our mother tongue. They impose fine on students who speak Kashmiri. How do you think it is justified? What about the parents? You will hardly see parents speaking to their children in Kashmiri. Now what about the children? They feel ashamed of speaking in Kashmiri. You have to agree to that. My cousins, they feel ashamed of speaking in Kashmiri among their peer groups. But is it the fault of the children? No. It is the fault of the system. Therefore, we need to change the system.
Yes. First of all, let's analyze the statement. Mother tongue Kashmiri is the best. Best for whom? Is it best for the education system? Is it best for the students? Is it best for the country, or is it best for the economy of our country? Well, I believe this is not the best, because there are more than 19,500 languages in India, and you know what? We cannot handle translating the same practice material to more than these 19,500 languages. That is a huge burden to our economy and our education system. Now, imagine a class. Everyone in the class is not from the same language, does not speak the same language, and is not from the same place, right? Now, if a teacher wants to teach, say for example, science, he has to maintain a language which is understood by all, that is a universal language, right? So, mother language is an apparel in which our thoughts are laid to the public. To reach out to the public at a large, you need a universal language, right? So, as per the sources and facts, more than 7,100 languages are spoken in the world. In today's cosmopolitan families, there are households which use more than one language in their homes. So, therefore, with so many languages prevailing in today's world, it is practically impossible for several different languages to be implemented in the education.
Language is something we communicate in. Language is something we attach our identity with. Language is something that defines us. Language is something that makes us. And language is what unites us. I am a Kashmiri. Why? I am a Kashmiri because I know Kashmiri. Take for example, I don't know Kashmiri. What would make me say that I am a Kashmiri when I don't know my language? Now there are some very important problems that we face as a society at large. The problem is the diminishing trend of Kashmiri language. So why is it happening? I believe, in my opinion, it is the colonization of minds that make us believe that the Kashmiri language is inferior. We see parents telling their kids to speak in English. I was never taught English at home. My family probably doesn't know even English, and Alhamdulillah, I speak English very well. So there is a dire need that we teach our kids, we teach our younger generation Kashmiri, because they are the ones who will become parents tomorrow. And in case they don't know this language, we all know where we are heading towards. So the stigma we have created towards this mother language, how can it be eradicated? Now that we have this thing into our hearts and brains, I don't know why, as Allama Iqbal beautifully says, यही दरस देता है हमें हर डूबता सूरज, मगरिब की तरफ जाओगे तो डूब जाओगे. We are all sinking, and it is time that we preserve ourselves, our language, our culture, our identity, because it defines who we really are.
Language is a powerful tool. Humans are the only living species capable of communicating by means of language. And it would be a waste to count all the things we're able to do on a daily basis by the means of this language and intercepting it. Every animal knows how to communicate or how to send messages of caution by means of signals. The distinctive factor which gives human language edge over all the other species is its supple nature. We can connect an infinite number of sounds and signs to produce an infinite number of sentences, each sentence carrying its own distinct meaning. We as humans are capable of ingesting, storing, communicating, and communicating this information in a prodigious manner. Language developed as a means of sharing information. Human being is a social animal who is dependent upon social cooperation for their survival. I agree when we remark how important a language is, but it must be kept in mind that the beauty of language lies within the fact that it is free-flowing and transcendental. Language loses its beauty if it is fettered by a curriculum or coercion. Kashmiri is an integral part of our identity as Kashmiris. It is a part of our legacy that we should always strive to carry forward. However, I strongly disagree with the notion that Kashmiri should be made mandatory as a curriculum in schools, and it should be the language in which education is imparted in the schools. Firstly, Kashmir is a very diverse territory. If at all Kashmiri is made a part of the school curriculum here, it shall defeat the notion of inclusivity, and it will be an arbitrary decision. I say this because Kashmir comprises of 10 districts, and Kashmiri is a very supple language, whose dialect and pronunciation varies from one place to another. What may be Asun or Vadun in one district becomes Bresun or Tungun in the other district. So how can we expect that a local language which lacks uniformity among regions can we introduce it to a uniform curriculum?
The UN Refugee Convention of 1951. Now what is this convention? It is an international convention that pertains to the refugee protection worldwide. The convention spells out clearly in Article 1A who a refugee is and what kinds of rights, duties, and assistance he is obliged to. Now, India is a host to a diverse number of refugees, be it from Myanmar, be it from Afghanistan, and also the other countries such as Afghanistan and Sri Lanka. But India has neither signed this convention of 1951, neither it has signed its protocol of 1967. Now there are two questions that arise. One, that India is home to 4 lakh refugees according to RRAC. So what are the laws that govern the entry and exit of these refugees? Does India have any domestic law? That is the first question. Now the second question, why does India need to ratify this convention? That is my second question, and my whole speech will revolve around these questions. Refugees in India lack the protection of international conventions, and there is no domestic legislative framework to deal with refugees. Instead, Foreigners Act of 1947 and the Passports Act of 1967, along with other legislations that regulate the entry and exit of foreigners, they have included the refugees also in the category of foreigners. All these laws and legislations that they have clubbed all the foreigners under the categories of aliens. There is no clear distinction between one, the illegal immigrant, and the second, the refugees. There is no clear distinction. These acts that guard the entry and exit of refugees, all of these laws, they are a disrespect for the international principle of non-refoulement. They give unbridled powers to the government to deport any refugee.
According to the UN, over 82.4 million people were forced to leave their homes in 2020, and more than 20 million of them are refugees. Over 2 lakhs of these refugees are currently in India. So, when we look through the prism of history, India has hosted people fleeing war, conflict, persecution many times, like the people from Sri Lanka in 1980s or Afghans from Afghanistan during varied waves of displacement, including the current one. The country has also experienced of rehabilitating partition refugees. Welcoming refugees lies at the core of India's secular, spiritual, and cultural values. India has taken part in 49 peacekeeping missions in which more than 195,000 troops and a significant number of police personnel assisted the UN and international NGOs in conflict-ridden lands. So in view of these data and surveys and the objective and the landmark achievement of India in keeping the peace in such regions.
Let's talk about what is the definition, what are the rights, what are the obligations of the refugees, and so on. What is a refugee? Who is a refugee? A refugee is a person who flees his country or his region of domicile and goes to another country because he is afraid of persecution, or if there is a threat of persecution based on that person's race, religion, a particular political ideology, or if the person belongs to a particular sect. Now let's talk about the rights they have, or the legal protection they have been given. They have a right of no expulsion. They cannot be expelled from that particular host country in any case unless it is specifically defined by the host country. Second, there is this principle of refoulement. They cannot be deported back to the country where they came from, where they're afraid of persecution, where they're afraid of a threat towards their life or freedom. And the third is the right to work, education, housing, the right to access courts, and so on and so forth. Now let's talk about why India hasn't already signed the Refugee Convention. There are two explanations that India gives. The first one being that there is again a security threat. It's a security reason. Now what they say is that the
the eastern area, the southeastern area is very porous. The borders are very porous. So any conflict in any other neighboring country will result in a mass movement of refugees in the country, which will in turn, they won't be, because of this mass movement, the demographic balance will not be maintained. Now, what will happen if the demographic balance is not maintained? Again, overpopulation, the biggest problem of India. The population would suddenly, there will be an influx of people and the population will suddenly increase. Again, India doesn't have the infrastructure, the economic conditions to provide for those people, right? So these are the explanation that India gives why it hasn't signed the Refugee Convention for now. Now, let's come to the main point, why India should sign the Refugee Convention. Now, again, India has certain problems with the definition of refugee. Again, as one of my colleagues already mentioned, there is one more point that they mention is that economic refugees, the people who have been expelled or who leave their country due to economic reasons, their economic rights are being violated. So why aren't they included in the definition of refugees, right? Since India is a regional leader, when India goes to this particular forum, it will have that power, that that position it will hold, the upper hand, and India will be able to negotiate these conditions that it wants to, that it wants to increase the scope or extend the scope of this particular definition.
It is currently a host, a considerable population of refugees and other displaced persons, and it is the United Nations Human Rights Convention report. As of January 2014, it's estimated that there were a total of 1,97,850 refugees from different backgrounds, as we are all well acquainted. We have all from Afghanistan, from Tamil Nadu, from Tamili refugees. Further, there is 10,09,015 Tibetan refugees. But, as my opponent again and again said, if you are fulfilling the conditions, then why do you need to ratify? Why aren't you signing or ratifying the convention? Let me tell you that India has already ratified the International Human Rights Law. The corpus of International Human Rights Law consisting of ICCPR, ICER, Convention, the Convention of Rights of Children, and Convention Against Torture. And each of these treaties properly contain important protections for right of asylum seekers and refugees in particular, except for certain rights. But let me tell you, isn't it failure of United Nations, as we see evidently? How can United Nations blame a country like India, who is, despite of having no means, still accommodating refugees? What about Ukraine? What about Syria? What about Palestine? Where is United Nations? We, being a poor country, still accommodating these people. The question is, why is refugee crisis at first? Why is not United Nations penalizing those who are creating these refugee crises? Why is this definition so partial? Why it actually, it's holding those who have helped the people, who have uplifted the people. I know the prominent argument from the opposition was that if India is already doing that thing, and that why it isn't ratifying, and we have conditions in slums and other things, then why aren't you questioning United Nations to provide funds? Why aren't you questioning the wealthy countries to do discrimination regardless of having resources and funds? We are a recently independent country. We are well aware about the conditions and how grave is how India has actually get over its problem from life expectancy rate being 35 to now 75.
Wherever I get an opportunity to hear some meaningful verses, I share them with my students. So allow me to share one couplet with you to begin with. It says that तरक्कियों की दौड़ में उसी का जोर चल गया. तरक्कियों की दौड़ में, it is only for you. एंड आई मीन इट। तरक्कियों की दौड़ में उसी का जोर चल गया, बना के जो अपना रास्ता निकल के आगे बढ़ गया। Friends, I foresee a very tough competition ahead of you, where, as said already, that only those who are strong will survive. Survival for the struggle and survival for the fittest. You will survive only and only when you have that potential, that stamina, that capacity which is required. And I personally believe that law is basically an applied subject. It is not to be taught within the four walls of a classroom. Students must go beyond that. Teachers must be mentors, guides, and counselors. Not only those teachers, traditional teachers. And they must facilitate students to travel beyond the walls of the classroom. And perhaps this is that exercise which you have undertaken, and for which I must congratulate Dean of the Faculty in the first instance, giving this leadership, and her colleagues and other students who are in fact working very hard to see these activities are undertaken and then successfully concluded. When I was going through these debates, trust me, I was feeling a very small person in front of my students, putting forth their arguments with great confidence, with great courage. Being a judge of this final round, if you will ask me, sir, tell us who is the winner, I will tell you all those who participated in this competition. Quite naturally, opposite of it must be also there. If all of them are winners, who is then the loser? I have a list of losers as well. All those are losers who got this opportunity to participate in this competition, but then did not find courage to participate in it. It may be a question of, honestly speaking, it was very difficult for me also to make this decision who should be considered as number one and number two or number three. For me, all of you are at number one. Trust me. Because this is the first step to come forward, to stand up and to express. It needs huge courage. It is very easy, let me share the secret with you, it is very easy to criticize your teachers. Go and see, stand here and then deliver. And see how much stamina you need, how much capacity you need, how much training you need for standing up, and you have shown that courage. For that, I salute all of you.
Esteemed Professor Farooq Ahmed Mir Sahab, Dean School of Legal Studies and Controller of Examinations, Central University of Kashmir, Professor Beauty Bande, Professor Oyub Sahab, senior colleagues, dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Again, I think we have been able to successfully conclude this program also, as we recently concluded our judgment reading program also, of which all of you are aware. Now we have a long list of programs that we are going to conduct, and I announce here that in the holy month of Ramadan, we are going to conduct Bahar-e Ramadan, and in that particular month, we are going to organize a lot of Islamic related events, and inshallah by the grace of Almighty Allah, we will again at that time request our teacher, Professor Farooq Ahmed Mir, at that time to come here and encourage our students here by distributing prizes and at the same time enlighten us by his knowledge. Now, having said all this, I thank you all. I, in particular, thank the EMMRC team here, which is always present and at the services of law department. I thank the judges here, in particular, Dr. Shahnaz, always available for the law society events. And at the same time, I am thankful to other judges, Sayyid Asima Rufai, Dr. Hina Basharat, Dr. Iftikhar Hussain. I thank you all. Thank you very much.